So it's Black History Month 2024, and the theme this year is called Reclaiming Narratives. Now, I'm not really sure if you'll understand what reclaiming narratives actually means. Anyone want to try anything? What does the word reclaiming mean? If I'm going to reclaim something back from someone, what am I going to do? I'm going to take it back, all right. So what's a narrative? What does, say that again? It's a story, yeah, okay, so that's exactly what it means. So we're going to take back the stories. So there are a lot of untrue stories that are floating around in the world about black people. For example, maybe black people only came to the UK as slaves. That's a narrative that needs to be reclaimed, all right? A narrative that needs to be reclaimed are things like black people weren't involved in the war, because yes, they were, because my great uncle was in the war. And another one is all about the impact black people have had on health and social care, which is of course a subject that you're learning about here. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. So I want to start with the first question. What is Black History Month? Show of hands who's heard of Black History Month before? Because I have, all right. I'm hoping everyone at least has heard of Black History Month, all right. What's one thing you learnt about when you did Black History Month at school? Can you remember anything? Did you learn about Martin Luther King, maybe? Yeah, okay. Did you learn about Rosa Parks, maybe? Yeah, okay. What do those people have in common that they don't have in common with us? Where does Martin Luther King come from? Is he from Britain? America, okay. Same with Rosa Parks. Does anyone know where Rosa Parks is from? America, okay. So I think the point I'm trying to make is that most of the stuff we learn about Black History Month is very Americanized, okay? Learning about American black people, well, what's the point? How's that really going to impact me and my story? So what I really hope is what you're going to pick up today is some of the stories about the really impactful black British people that impacted health and social care. Because there are a lot of black British history stories that we don't hear about, because we just tend to hear about your Martin Luther Kings, your Malcolm X's and your Rosa Parks. But I'm going to introduce you to some famous black British people today, okay? Like it says on here, and I just said, so within health and social care, there are a select group of black people who've not just excelled, but they've revolutionised health and social care. So some of the people are across the bottom. I'm not expecting you to know, but can you name any famous black person in the field of health and social care? They could be alive, they could no longer be alive. Can you name any nurses? Don't worry. I mean, there's a lady just here. I'm not sure if anyone's heard of a lady called Mary Seacole. Yeah, what do we know about Mary Seacole? Yeah, she helped soldiers in the World War, she did. So even though she's a huge part of our black British history, I bet you all of you can tell me much more about Malcolm X and Rosa Parks than you can actually tell me about Mary Seacole. So hopefully I'm going to teach you a little bit about her today as well. In 1853, so she was born in Jamaica, but she's British because for those of you who are not aware, Britain went and colonialised a lot of the world, didn't they? They went and took over lots of different places, including the Caribbean and other areas. So that means that people in those countries then became British because they had British citizenship. That is because Britain went over and took over their country, so therefore they had British citizenship. So Mary Seacole is a British Jamaican for that reason. And she travelled to England to help in the war, like this lady here just said. And she was an army nurse during the war. Has anyone heard of someone called Florence Nightingale? Did you learn about Florence Nightingale at school? Yeah. Another nurse. What colour was Florence Nightingale? She's white, yeah. Now my daughter's 8 years old and she loves all of this kind of stuff, and she'll tell a story about how Florence Nightingale didn't like Mary Seacole, and she was really horrible to Mary Seacole because she recognised how much Mary Seacole knew. So Mary Seacole very often wasn't allowed in the same room as Florence Nightingale. And she'd do lots of horrible things to try and make her look bad in the field. But that didn't stop Mary Seacole from doing what she had to do. And like I said, she worked really hard. She was dedicated to the injured soldiers during the war. So she had a lot of trouble as well because she was British and she was a fabulous nurse. So what she wanted was for Britain to fund her travel over to Britain to help with the war. But they didn't want to give her the money to do it. So she had to raise her own money and come over. But again, she came over and she did a fabulous job, and she's forever remembered now as one of the biggest supporters and biggest nurses that supported Black British heroes and white heroes, in the war. So Mary Seacole, you'll see a lot more about her throughout your time in college, hopefully. But this is someone I think that you should learn more about. So if you get a chance, do some Googling and find out a bit more about Mary Seacole and the work that she did. Does anyone in their family have a nurse or a doctor? I do. My mum was a nurse. My nan was a nurse. What about yourself? Anyone? Yeah, in your family? Sister and brother are doctors, nurse?
He's a mental health nurse, and then our sister's a paediatric.
Anyone else in your family have? Brother-in-law, yeah. Anyone else? Your aunt. You're a nurse as well, yeah. And anyone here thinking about maybe being a nurse or working for the NHS? Probably, yeah. Now I'm going to say something now that some people might find a little controversial, but I feel like it's true. Do we find that there's a lot of people of colour that work in the NHS? Yeah. When you go to the doctors, you see a lot of black and brown people, don't you? When you go, to the hospital, you see a lot of black and brown nurses, etc. You know, you see a lot of people that are what we might call BAME, so Black, Asian, Minority, Ethnic. But there's a reason for that. Do we know why that is? No? Okay, this might help a little bit. So, anyone got any family or anyone know what Windrush is? Or heard about Windrush? Don't worry if you haven't. Okay. So, in the 1950s, late 1940s, early 1950s, Britain was at war again. You know, they like to have a fight, don't they, Britain? But what was happening is they didn't have enough people left over here to do all the jobs. So most of the people that did all the main jobs, they were out at the war. So in order to keep the country going, what Britain did is they reached out to those colonies. Remember I said they went over and they took over the Caribbean and different places. So what they did, they went over there and they said, could you come over to England to help to support the country? And all the people in the Caribbean and in India and all these other countries, they said, yeah, we'll come over. We'll come over to England and we'll help to keep your economy stable. We'll do all the jobs that all of your people can't do at the moment because they're out fighting the war. So a lot of these people came over, and my nan and granddad were two of these people. They came over on a ship. It wasn't a ship called Windrush, but a lot of people came over on a ship called Windrush. And it took about a week to come over. I remember my granddad showed us pictures. He had a little brown suitcase. He's got his best clothes on because, you know, it's a big journey. He's going over to a new country. And at the time, I think my nan was around 18 and I think my granddad was around 22. They weren't married yet, but they were coming over to start a new life. And my granddad worked in British Transport, but my nan came over and she worked for the NHS alongside a lot of other black women and a lot of Asian women as well. So they came over and they did a lot of work in the NHS. So they were there to help build up the NHS and keep it going. So Britain really relied on these people to come over and take care of us and take care of our country. And that has kind of stuck from today, so it's till today. So that is probably why you still see a lot of people of colour working in this industry, because when they first came over in the late 1940s and early 1950s, these are the jobs that they came over to do. So you can imagine, or how do you think they might have felt? Like, for example, my nan's come over. My granddad came over first, a week earlier. Then he sent for my nan, she came over. She'd never been on a boat. She's on a boat for a whole week. She's not with anyone that she knows. She's going to a strange country. How do you think that might have felt? Scary, definitely. I mean, she's only a couple of years older than you, but can you imagine, like, traveling hundreds of miles on your own to a country that you don't know? You don't know what's going to be there when you get there. But then also, not on top of that, they've come to help the country, but they're experiencing racism. You've come to help someone, and then you're being told not to touch someone because they don't want your black skin to touch them and things like that. How might that have made them feel? I know how I would have felt. I would have felt sad. I would have felt isolated. I would have felt like I wanted to go home. What about British food? How do you think they would have felt about eating British food? What's some traditional food? What's some traditional food in your culture? Okay, so imagine you come over and then they don't even know what jollof rice is. All they know about is chips and gravy and things like that. Your body's not used to eating that type of food either. So then, you got to think about what might that have felt like as well. All right. So NHS workers. So I haven't used anyone in particular here because I can almost guarantee everyone sitting here has got an NHS worker in their history that they could learn more about. Mine's my nan. I mean, God rest her soul. She passed away like 2-3 years ago now. But to me, she is the person that sits in that box there. And I'm sure you guys have someone in your family that you can refer to as well. Another person that I want to introduce you to is this lady called Professor Elizabeth Onowu. So she's someone that you should learn more about. She's a very special figure within the world of health and social care. So she's worked in hospitals and clinics for a long, long time. She's also a teacher of nurses and doctors, so she helps to teach nurses and doctors. She's done a lot to help to make sure that black and brown nurses and doctors are treated equally. Because like I said in the beginning, when they came over and they're doing such a good job, they were getting a lot of racism. And it still happens now. NHS workers probably get some of the most racism while at work than anyone else. I've heard stories of them being spat on, being kicked, being punched, being attacked. And it's unacceptable. But in order to stop that from happening, Professor Elizabeth Onowu has done a lot of work around that. So her life has been committed to teaching us that with care, commitment and courage, you can make the world a healthier and more equal place. And she's an expert in something called, has anyone heard of sickle cell? Yeah. Another thing that impacts black and brown people only, which is crazy. So again, she's done a lot of research on the condition about sickle cell, and she's done a lot to help to progress that forward. So if you are doing any work about anything like this, you might want to research Professor Elizabeth and the work that she does around sickle cell. Probably my favourite person is this lady. So this is Dr. Samantha Tross. And she is, because she's not was, because she's still alive, she is the UK's first black orthopaedic surgeon. Does anyone know what an orthopaedic surgeon is? It's about things like bones and things like that. Okay. One thing that's really special about this lady, a bit like me, she went to this college. Okay. She actually went to Matthew Bolton, this very campus. Well, when it was at another site, but she actually went to this college, which I think is amazing. So she's alumni of the college. So she's the first black orthopaedic surgeon. And she's done a lot of things to help to develop surgery for black and brown people. Because again, we have different needs, and we already know that in healthcare, a lot of the time those needs are overlooked. Has anyone ever heard or discussions around the experiences of like black and brown women when they go in to have babies? Has anyone heard anything around that? No? Right then, but just think about researching it later on, because you are in the industry as well. So a lot of the time our healthcare isn't as great as the healthcare that's given to white people. We're overlooked at times. We're like, oh, we're moaning, you know, but it's not that. It's just that they don't recognise that we have different types of needs. But people like Samantha Truss, she makes sure that she's meeting the needs of everyone, including black and brown people as well. And my final person, because I thought there's a lot of women, it's always women in health and social care, like there's always women that we talk about, nursing, etc. So another person, and I want to get this right, John Alcindor, he was a physician and World War II hero. So a lot like the lady I showed first, Professor Elizabeth Onowu, he has done a lot to further health and social care for black and brown people as well. So Dr. John Alcindor was a medical physician. He was from Trinidad, but then he came over, just like Mary Seacole did, to practice medicine over here in the UK. But again, he faced a lot of racial injustice. He faced a lot of racism, but he didn't let that stop him. So he came over and he studied at Edinburgh University, and he got a scholarship, and he graduated in 1899, where he started practicing as a physician in many London hospitals. Then when World War I started, he applied to join the Royal Army Medical Corps, but he was refused because, again, the colour of his skin meant that he wasn't allowed to stand next to other white doctors, which again is just so crazy, because he was probably much more qualified than they were. But just because the colour of his skin, they said no, they didn't want him. So instead, he went and signed up for the British Red Cross, which we still have now. And he worked with them for many years. And what used to happen in the war, have you heard of the Underground in London? Has anyone been on the Underground? So during the war, the Underground was like a hospital. And they used to get everyone in the Underground, all the wounded people, and they'd treat them in the Underground. So Dr. John Alcindor, he was one of the doctors who used to work in the Underground hospital. And he did a lot more. He went on to serve as a senior district medical officer, and he died in 1921. But it's all the work that he's done. So he's done a lot of research into things like flu. So flu used to be a huge thing that used to kill people many years ago. But because of research, you can get the flu now and you can just be fine. You can just have some paracetamol and you used to be fine. You can be fine. But he's done a lot of research into that, into TB, and into cancer as well. So if you'd like to do more research on people, black people in the sector, again, Dr. John Alcindor is a really, really strong person as well. So we've talked a little bit. I've had a few discussions with you about like different people. We've talked about like what obstacles do you think they may have faced? You know, there was racism, there was the fact that you might be scared coming over, you might be nervous, you might not have any friends, you might not like the food. I'd just cry all day. I can't imagine moving to another country now at this point in my life, never mind when I was so young. And I just miss everyone so much. But I think it's really important to have the discussion, you know. And then we talked about the importance of them being in part of the story as well. Thank you so much. You've been amazing. All right.